This is an interview with Bob Stutchel on February the 22nd, 1956, at Mr. Stutchel's home. Mr. Stutchel was born in Indiana, Pennsylvania, on October the 2nd, 1869. On January the 20th, 1904, he moved to Ardmore to drill the first well in Carter County. He is going to tell you his memories of the oil fields in Carter County.
On my return from Newfoundland in 1930, I went to work in West Virginia for the South Penn Oil Company. And while there, the Star Drilling Machine Company wrote me stating they had sold a drilling machine to the Ardmore and Boston Company of Boston and was shipping it to Ardmore, Oklahoma, and asked me if I would come out and take charge of the machine and drill the well. I notified them that as soon as I had finished up on the well I was on, I would do so. And in January, I started out here and landed in Ardmore the 4th day of January, 1904. The machine had preceded me here, and Mr. Father Richmond of Ardmore and Will Fraser of Ardmore had moved the machine out to the location when I got here. 2 days after I arrived in Ardmore, I went out to the location on Oil Spring Prairie, west of what is now Oil City, and rigged up the machine and started the well. We had to have some pipe, and we had to order it from St. Louis, Missouri, the closest that we got it at that time. When the pipe came, we went ahead with the well, and after getting to about 600 feet, we needed another string of 10-inch pipe and an underroomer. That was the year of the World's Fair at St. Louis, and I went to St. Louis at that time and got the pipe and shipped the underroomer and pipe here. And after I visited around the fair, I went back to Pittsburgh for a few days and then returned here. And while I was gone, Mr. Hyde and Jack Davidson, who were here at that time, attempted to put the pipe in oil and run the underroomer, and got the underroomer stuck in the pipe. And when I got back here, everything was in a bad shape, and I couldn't do anything with it. And the Ardmore and Boston Company at that time had run out of money and had about decided to quit. They still owe me 2 months' wages. Shortly after quitting the Ardmore and Boston Company, the Santa Fe Railroad Company came into the old Wheeler location and bought a Columbia drilling machine from the National Supply Company. And I went to work for them on the first well. I drilled wells as deep as we could with that machine, and finally had to quit, just too small to handle the pipe and stuff that we had to use. In the meantime, the Santa Fe sent a rig builder and a rig, timbers for a rig rather, and the irons, out to Wheeler, and Bulldog Smith, we always called him Bulldog. He was a rig builder, and he came out there, and I helped him to build the rig, the first standard rig in the field. And we started to work on that rig just as soon as it was completed. Myself and Jim Murray as drillers, and Charlie Coolidge and Ron Bennett were the tool dressers. Jim Murray came from Pennsylvania originally, and Charlie Coolidge came from north of Topeka, Kansas, and Lon Bennett came from down in Texas. After we had drilled that first well in, then the Santa Fe shut down for a short time, and I went to Florida and drilled 2 wells for the government, one on Egmont Key and one on Millett Key for water. Now that's about all it is to that well, drilling that first well for the Santa Fe. Mr. Stutchel, who drilled the first well in Ragtown, that is the first producing well, came to Ardmore in 1911. I'll get a little closer. And got some leases near Marietta, northeast of Marietta, owned by Doug Wilson. We moved the rig from Ardmore City Lake, which was owned by the Dixie Drilling Company, to Marietta to drill the first well, about 4 miles northeast of Marietta. That was drilled by the Dixie Drilling Company. Then we moved that rig southwest from Marietta onto the Bill Washington farm and drilled a well there. And while they were working on that well, we moved the rig from Berwyn to Marsden on the Bud Wallace farm. And I was working on that well when Mr. Critchlow decided to drill the first well at Healdon, which they call Ragtown or Healdon, either one. And he came down there and talked to me about drilling that well out there and gave me his locations. And through the information I got from Mr. Goodrich, who was geologist for the Santa Fe while I was working for them, I sort of advised him that I wouldn't drill on the locations that he had picked. But he gave Mr. Nichols of the Dixie Drilling Company a contract to drill the first well, and instructed him to go out there and drill and make the location wherever he thought best on the bunch of leases that he had. Mr. Nichols went out there and found a good big pond of water on Mr. Wirt Franklin's land in Section 8 and located alongside of that pond of water so he'd be sure to get water easy. That well came in March of 1913. Made a small well, just 20 bars, I guess, about the limit. Afterwards, Mr. Critchlow drilled both of the locations that he had suggested to me at Marsden, and both were dry holes.
Where did you live while you drilled the wells?
Well, while we was working on these wells, we boarded at the closest place we could get to the rig. Sometimes we had to walk a couple of miles, sometimes we get in pretty close. While we drilled a well at Berwyn, we boarded in Berwyn. And while we drilled the first well at Marietta, there was a farmer which was on the place boarded us there. We had to build a camp house of our own, that is for sleeping quarters, but we ate at the farmhouse. And when we went to the Washington Ranch, southwest of Marietta, we boarded with the man on the farm there. And when we come to the Marsden, on the Bud Wallace place, Mr. Wallace, who had a full-blood, almost full-blood Indian wife, took us in to eat there, and we got along fine. But while we was doing this work for Mr. Critchlow, who was a preacher, we didn't work any on Sundays, and I had a room rented in Ardmore by the month. Sometimes I would come in Saturday night to stay over Sunday, and I'd find somebody else in my room. And then I'd have to go out and rent me a room someplace else. Made it a little inconvenient, but we got along all right.
We have heard the story of the oil history as told by Mr. Stutchel. Now let's see what the story of a cook was. Miss Stutchel was born at St. Joe, Texas in 1880. She came to Oil Spring Prairie because she owned a part of the lease which was to be drilled into the first well. She is going to tell you her impressions of the oil fields as she saw them as the first well's cook.
I cooked for the Ardmore and Boston Oil Company drillers that drilled the first well in Carter Oil County. The well did not prove to be an oil well, but it is a gasser and furnishes gas today to run the farmhouse on the lease owned by my daughter, Mary and Bill Blanton, now retired from the Carter Oil Company, living in Sulphur, Oklahoma. We had tents to live in at that time, a double tent with a breezeway between. Cooked in one side and lived in the other. I lived in a tent, the third tent. Houses were not to be found, so you had to live in tents. And when we came to Ardmore, it took us all day to come because of the roads that we had. The drillers were Easterners from Boston and Pennsylvania. And in later years, I married the Pennsylvania driller, who was Bob Stutchel. He was a Yankee, and I was a Democrat. That's it.
Well, Miss Stutchel, where did you get the water that you used for cooking?
We got it from a spring, and the spring at times would bubble up a gas, and then a little bubble of oil would come out from it.
Well, didn't that pollute the water?
Well, we had to use it. That's all we had.
That was all that was there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you said that you cooked, but where did you get the supplies if the towns were far away?
When we come to town, we carried out enough to last us. Got it from Ardmore.
And took out a large supply at a time?
Yes.
This concludes the interview with Mr. and Ms. Bob Stutchel. This interview was made by Jim Bruce, a senior at Ardmore High School.